Well, hello, everybody. Welcome on this November 14th, these times that we live in. My name is Stephen Salmoni. I'm one of the directors of POG. POG is a poetry organization that's been hosting readings for close to a quarter of a century, I think, and we're delighted to have you join us here this evening, as virtual as we are. Our two readers tonight, we have two wonderful readers. We have Will Stanier, our very own Will, and Janice Lee. And before I turn the podium over to Cameron Louis, who will be introducing Will, just a couple of items of business that we always take care of. So first, we'd like to thank the following organizations and groups for their support. The Arizona Commission on the Arts for their Arizona Cares grant, which was most welcome. Poets and Writers, the U of A Poetry Center, Chax Press, the U of A English Department, and Arizona Quarterly. And also, I'd like to thank our individual donors for their very generous contributions. There's a nice list of those. So our patrons are Charles Alexander, Mary Ellen Bartholomew, Charles Bernstein, Cynthia Hogue, Jason Lagapa, Joan Larkin, Judith LaFay, Cameron Louis, Lisa Martin, John Melillo, Cynthia Miller, Tenny Nathanson, Stephen Romaniello, Stephen Salmoni, myself, Richard Tavener, and David Weiss. And our sponsors, Karen Brennan, Cutthroat, A Journal of the Arts, Reed Dixon, Lynn Finger, Anna Lambert, Little Red Leaves, and Don Pendergrast, Heidi McDonald, Barbara Miller, Jameson Nowinski, I'm not sure if I said that correctly. Please forgive me if I said your name incorrectly. The Oracle Retreat for Writers, Jenna Osman, Propolis Press, Anthony Sovak, and Susan Thackeray. If you're interested in helping us with the donation, you might visit our website, which is www.pogarts.tucson.org. And at the top of that page, there's a little tab which has membership and support, and you'll find a pledge form to become a patron, which is $100 or more, or a sponsor, $50, or anything that you might consider giving. This has been a tough year for nonprofits and for arts all across the board. We're in a pandemic, and many of the organizations that would have given us money that traditionally have done so are tapped out or giving it elsewhere. So we depend upon our individuals, our audience, our family, more than any, we always do, but now more than any time. So we hope you can help support us. Okay. We'll be taking a little break in December. So this will be the last reading for the calendar year, but we do have a full schedule coming up in January. Lainey Brown and Sheila Murphy, January 16th, also at 6 p.m. virtual via Zoom. And again, please visit our website, pogarts.tucson.org, for our full upcoming schedule. At the conclusion of this reading, we'd like to invite all of you to a very short informal gathering where we just to talk and be together and meet our poets. And this will be hosted through a second Zoom link, which will be forthcoming in the chat. And finally, POG intends our space to be a safe and inclusive space with all that entails. If anybody should feel otherwise, please do reach out to one of our directors. And maybe I could ask all the directors now, just a quick show of hands who you are, besides myself. We have David, and we have Cynthia and Charles, Lisa, Will, Cameron, Tenny. Okay, so thank you very much. And I'd like to turn it over to Cameron now to introduce Will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm really excited to be introducing Will tonight, who joins us from what looks to be an extremely cozy, he's got a fire burning in the background, and what a nice environment. And I'm just really excited to hear Janice's work as well. So thank you so much, Janice, for making time for this and for POG. Yeah. So I'm just going to begin by just sharing some facts about Will. He is from Athens, Georgia. He graduated from the University of Arizona's MFA in creative writing. He is the author of a chapbook, Everything Happens Next, coming out with Blue Arrangements next year. His poems have appeared in Cleaver Magazine, Interim, The Volta, Pacifica, and Lazy Susan. When it comes to outdoor recreation, Will told me once that he prefers bird watching over rock climbing. Will has, and may still, to my knowledge, been known to ride his bicycle around town while sporting a multicolored polka dot helmet. So he's very easy to spot. His poems have variously involved airplanes, heartbreak, walnuts, babies, the 14th Duke of Mandas, magic newts, William Shakespeare, island marooning, and Y2K. And within the toxic trash heap that is the website ratemyprofessor.com, one student said of Will, quote, "This guy is a champ, and he's trying his best. He makes class fun, even though we don't stay on topic a lot. A real ass gem. Appreciate this guy." Another student said in all caps that Will is, quote, "solid," and has, quote, "very cool socks," which is true. Once, Will Stanier told me that one of his favorite conjunctions is moreover. And I like people who have favorite conjunctions. And I agree that moreover is far better than supposing, whereas, though, or inasmuch. A conjunction is, of course, a connective element or a word that joins and coordinates a meeting place, as though an audience of poetry lovers wouldn't already know that, but I just felt compelled to define, as we do. And just so Will is himself an agent of conjunction, he brings people together for collaboration. And his poems definitely coordinate the great big universe of big ideas and feelings with the very small world of immediate preoccupations and experience. Just listen to these lines from his sonnetish poem, Minor Celebrities. "I met one of Her Majesty's cameramen once in a shadowy alleyway in Plymouth, South Dakota. Anyway, it was nothing to write home about. While I'm at it, did you make sure to feed my parrot?" Moreover, Will endears himself to us, volunteering his time and his infallible letterpress work to POG. You've probably seen a lot of his beautiful broadsides at past POG readings, and some of you may have them up on your walls, as I do. Moreover, Will once helped me obtain 30 bottles of Portuguese wine. Moreover is beyond what has been said, or there's more to say, which is the prevailing feeling of Will's poems. I'm going to steal a bit from Will here and quote his recent interview from Noah Falk's work. Will's poems like to introduce us to an idea, quote, catching and directing our attention before subverting it again. This is the sleight of hand or sleight of thought that is so wonderfully particular to poetry, and Will does it very well. He harnesses a potential energy that we learn to sense, yet never fully anticipate. A quasi-unending sentence, an odd kind of poetic Rube Goldberg device, as Will puts it, that may slow down or may look like it's coming to rest, but which is really winding up, getting ready to spark to life again. So I'm really excited to hear him read tonight. Will, thank you. Take it away.
I navigated away from my screen, and I think that unmuted me. So I'm going to read 10 or 12 poems. They're all pretty short tonight. And some of the first work I'll be reading is from the chapbook that Cameron mentioned, which is coming out in January from Press Blue Arrangements. I have a lot of different stuff. Poems that track different intention and different feeling. Most of the poems in the chapbook that's coming out are more notational diary entries. I enjoyed the form, and I enjoyed how the poems came together. I'll read some of those, and then I'll just read some uncollected new works. Thank y'all again. This first poem is called Parade. Sitting, wasting time, thereby seize it. Sounds so aggressive. Here actors rehearse clunky dialogue, feet sweaty in flannel lining, look up and there's the sky again. I'm glad not to be sick after drinking too much, to be without hermeneutics, whatever those are. A man walks by rolling a double bass on a single wheel. My friend walks by talking on the phone, red tassels bouncing at the cuffs of her jeans. 3 watermelon lozenges turn my tongue sugary pink. I see a beautiful woman. I see a lot of people. And another small note-taking poem. And this features some writing from my friend, Jean, who's quoted in the poem. Murmurs. What in the dream has 8 corners? I don't know. Pinhole camera of my hand, fingers splayed against the sky, swarming, blushing, in edges and inlets. Funny, the oniric specters, like I was supposed to know about things I didn't. Near the trestle bridge made famous, as regular people out for a walk refused to be our project. And this is a poem, this is an airplane poem. I think a lot of people's favorite line from this poem, I need to say, is actually not my words. When I read this poem, people tell me what they like, and I must say the line is not mine. It's from Stacy S., poet from Tucson as well. Things to do on an airplane. Look below at the lights, mostly white, toasty orange. Some blue, some green. See an illuminated form of a crucifix and large patches not. Could be a forest or some of the ocean. Sleep with neck bent, twiddle thumbs, practice dying. Watch hockey on seatback monitor, track puck glitch across ice, and eat pretzel rations. Remember as far as possible a distance traveled backwards, but really has no direction. The pretzel rations are Stacy's line. Advent Hero, this is a Christmas poem. Is the pattern of flowers violet or violent? Outside through early blue light, flowers yawn. From the crash box of my chest, thwump thwump. Approximate crockery, spangled arcade, wet tongue on floor fuzz, and empty into wakefulness where I find you've eaten all the very best dates. Ask about Aquaman, I don't know. Content sitting here, regifting the lyric. Like on the ground floor of our position, there is no dictionary. No clever plot line behind this drive up the mountain.
It's too old.
Mulberry leaves somersault across. Earth blooms like any old vegetable. Poem after Lou Welsh. Had the first stanza and the last stanza of this poem are Lou Welsh's, and my stuff is in between. Poem after Lou Welsh. Months and months go by before I can worry about my hairdo. This is a story about a talking donkey and the 7 of diamonds. No, the donkey can't talk is named the 7 of diamonds. College students jaywalk saying, fuck it. There's no law and order. There are baby strollers in the bike lane and bikes on the sidewalk. There are 2 halves of me, the thinking half and the feeling half. The first lies in the shade all day, while the second basks in the sun. It's hard to feel as a rider on a spinning ball. And those are most of the poems from the chapbook. The chapbook ends with kind of a bonus section of 3 poems. And for Christmas and the holidays and the New Year, I'm sending around a smaller excerpt, kind of like a postcard of the last 3 kind of bonus poems of the chapbook. And this poem is one of those bonus poems. Spanish Days. I'm going to take a drink before this one because it's kind of a tongue twister. Spanish Days. The virtual bartenders around here really know their brandy, their cognac, and regularly impress the pants off workaday drinkers. As in, top of the line vanishing tricks pre-ordered from Ireland, plus certain acres of musty emerald pasture that are exactly what your head smells like. Only fancy people receive mail on Sundays. Packages delivered by postal workers wearing updated pith helmets, causing them to resemble the 14th Duke of Mendez. For 6 months, the 14th Duke of Mendez was out hunting on safari. The Duke of Mendez, like all true Spaniards, despised the taste of cognac. And over the summer, I was writing a lot of sonnets. I think I'm going to finish out the reading here by reading a few of those sonnets. But before I do, I wanted to throw in a brand new poem for the exercise of it. I've given it the uninspiring name of poem, but it was my attempt at an abecedarian poem. After it was all said and done, but before it was really over, canned, kaput, complete, dead as a doornail, as they say, and empty of everything we'd found there. Gobstoppers and galoshes, globe-trotter hand-me-downs, hula hoops and fancy old hat boxes. I wanted to ask one simple question. Just a matter of pride, I guess. Know who I am? I asked the folks around, lawyers and tax people, a few professional movers. I'm the nephew of Madame Narcissa. But nobody acknowledged me. One young woman carrying an outrageous portmanteau paused and pointed at a placard. Quiet, please, it read. That surprised me. Quiet? After all the ruckus the sousaphones and Aunt Sissy's band made? Or Travis, the tortoise importer, who tromped up the stairs until 4 a.m? Viceroys and vivisectionists vying for visits, wailing from their Winnebagos parked outside. Xylophones and those crazy Xerox machines. You wouldn't believe I began to say, yet zilch was their concern. Even Zax, the ex-butler. And this is minor celebrities. Cameramen of Her Majesty's Secret Service hold no allegiances. An unfortunate fact with obvious, often terrible consequences. Look no further than your local corner store and you'll see what I mean. Newspaper racks upended and the cashiers all scampering about, nervously chewing their fingernails. I met one of Her Majesty's cameramen once in a shadowy alleyway in Plymouth, South Dakota. Anyway, it was nothing to write home about. While I'm at it, did you make sure to feed my parrot? I left his grub pellets in a blue container in the garage, behind the punching bag and next to the pool equipment. I don't own a pool anymore, but I did when I lived in France with the nephew of the president, the French president, of course. Coco Chanel's stepdaughter lived a few doors down, and sometimes we'd meet just to shoot the breeze. This is another sonnet. I'll read 2 more of these. This is called Crossing the Delaware, and it's my, I guess, historical fiction sonnet. All our recent patriots hail from Winnipeg, yet you and I are not from Winnipeg, and to say so would be a deception of the cruelest kind. Green lightning strikes the graveyard. Raspberries are sad, and poised in their plastic crates seem so sweet, like actors rehearsing an audition. Green is such a tough color to get right. I felt like a novel with the rain outside, dangerous in my reverie. I wanted to drive to Winnipeg to visit your grandmother, a certified daughter of the American Revolution. I possessed a crystalline unit of thought. Rollerbladers are very blithe, yet that was getting me nowhere. I needed a pep talk, like Washington gave those soldiers crossing the Delaware on their way to Winnipeg. And this is my last poem. Thank you again. I don't think I've read to so many family members and friends at one time. So thank you. And I'm excited for Janice. And thank you again, Cameron, for the introduction. Dark Sonnet. Each waking moment is the first. You put in everything you can and then you're done. Sunny Antarctic light puts a flash on early morning joggers, although I've never been there before, under the ice, except in that one movie by Herzog. Movie people, aloof and glamorous, not about to fraternize with us minor Americans. But then again, what do I know? Frequent, non-parallel doings. Hummingbirds the size of hamsters, the kind of pet you can't just freeze and place a leash around, regardless of your gusto. I place a darkness around myself like parentheses or a faux feather boa, a decoration, a secret place, a souvenir from the wrong side of town with which I conduct my army of suitors, where I am their every heartbreak. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Will. That was beautiful. I've never heard you read before. That was really, really nice. Charles Alexander is going to introduce Janice.
I also wanted to say, and David Weiss, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the after reading conversation is just going to be right here on this gathering. So you don't have to leave and come back or follow another link. Okay.
Okay.
Janice Lee is a Korean-American writer, editor, publisher, shamanic healer. She has 7 books of fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. The most recent being The Sky Isn't Blue, and 2 of them are forthcoming just in the next couple of years. Imagine a Death, which will be out from the Operating System, and Separation Anxiety from Clash Books. She writes about interspecies communication, plants, personhood, the filmic long take, slowness, the apocalypse, architectural spaces, inherited trauma, the concept of Han in Korean culture, and much more. She combines shamanic and energetic healing with plant and animal medicine and teaches workshops on inherited trauma, healing, and writing. She's founder and executive editor of Entropy, co-founder of the Accomplices. She lives in Portland and is an assistant professor of creative writing at Portland State University. She asks the question, how do we hold space open while maintaining intimacy? I take that intimacy to be with others, including other species, maybe others that aren't beings in a conventional sense, but spirits, moments, movements, and probably intimacy with ourselves. Han in Korean American literary senses, and maybe more than literary, involves coming from trauma, including generational trauma and separation, It also implies an impossibility of articulation or expression, a sense of continuous irresolvability about one's being. Yet working through Han can also involve moving through such questions and allow for reaching beyond traditional narrative structures, exploring how lived experience intersects with individual identity. The question or the sets of questions put in motion here provide the ground for Lee's work in writing, in teaching, in scholarship, in simply sharing. One Lee poem, which is multilingual, begins, "We exist in relation to," and then a long dash. In her work and thinking, the aftermath of that long dash implies a continuous field we need to find. Ultimately, what she shares may help shape a future in which, as she put it in a 2019 interview with Kathy Hong, we, and hers is a big collective we, will, quote, be able to shed the burden of and dependence on linear time and see how connected everything really is. It's a great pleasure tonight to share that connection with Janice Lee.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you to Pod. Thank you, Charles, for the invitation. And thank you, Will, for that reading. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna start with a few poems from Separation Anxiety, which is forthcoming in 2022, and then I'm gonna finish with an excerpt from the novel Imagine a Death, which is actually now coming from Texas Review Press, not the operating system. So these poems are from Separation Anxiety, and they don't have titles, so I'm just gonna kind of go through them. And I'll just start.
Speaker view. Red. Looked at David the whole time.
Have you noticed all of the shocked faces of others when you aren't able to learn the lesson that you are teaching others? When there's snow, you can cover or smooth the way, as in it's colder now, as in what you eat is tied to the cow that graces, slowly contemplating the uncertainty of what comes next. Only the cows have the time to think so extensively about time. You might look less at your palm if you could recall the density of the forest. We couldn't get into the garden, he said. She said there was a wall, they said. The wall walls said the circumstances of the event itself. Within the wound, there is always a wall, but it didn't just appear there overnight, an attempt to track the source of relief, of walling. The plants may have protested, but no one listens to what sounds like silence. Silence is conceived, perceived, said the false pictures of edges along the graceful trail, lightened, penetrated, said. And the trees weren't heard, and the wall persists because that's the way it is, he said, she said. It's always been that way, they said. The trees, said the unsaid. Dog, fellow, distance. Horse is the same as hyacinths depending on who is translating. Magnificent horse, magnificent seer. In a dream, the dream is not a dream, but a perceptual landing site. Reality is not the opposite of a dream, but a lens. The lens is not smudged, but revisited. It is all water. Water is not always clear, but it is life. We do not drink water, but locate it inside ourselves. In a dream, horse is the same as hyacinths depending on the terrain. In a dream, I step outside and my dog looks for a place to poop, but I keep tugging the leash. I keep telling him, hold on, hold on, hold on, dragging him further and further away from the house. In a dream, I step outside and my father has built wooden walkways over the lawn, wooden boxes around the plants, wooden caskets around the trees, all of the bushes and shrubs and weeds. I try to cry out no. I open my mouth no. I have lost my voice. It is raspy. I find my sister. I tell her, you have to tell him no. She tells me, tell him yourself. I say, I have no voice. I am crying and pleading with my raspy voice. I cannot breathe. Should we talk about the piece of turkey in the shape of a hammerhead shark? An invitation to empathetic seeing might begin with the tree, might begin with the phrase, I suppose. And the density of a forest might begin at the edges, blurred, unfocused. One tree falls down and we all hear it falling. The other trees around it rattle and shake, are affected by the other tree, are affected. When there is so much green, we might penetrate the picture space and find ourselves lost in the shades of green. When the person in front of us is dressed in blue, we might speak for them in a bout of empathy and find ourselves lost in those shades of blue. This is the density of color when one has nowhere left to go. When their back is to us, we might think, just get a grip, man, and then they do get a grip. Still lost in the green, one might think it all ends where it begins, and yet nothing begins again. The landscape is green and rain, and the body is obscured by the veil of moisture, and the green is obscured by eyes looking. And the edges blur again as a cow moves slowly. The periphery is unreliable. The cow is unreliable. The spectator is unreliable. The rain is unreliable. Empathy is unreliable. I remember the feeling of being alive. I feel something, yet find myself located here. It isn't so green here. Neither am I welcomed by the intimacy of the rain. Neither has it ended yet. Neither has it begun. So I'm going to read a chapter now, and I'll finish with this from my novel Imagine a Death, which is forthcoming next fall. And all I will say is that it takes place in a sort of kind of deterioration of society, and there's fires happening, there's birds falling from the sky. And there's various characters that are all entangled in this environment, and at least a few of them are human characters. And this chapter is about one of them, who is the writer. In another place, not close nor far, yet connected very closely nonetheless. After all, there is nothing that connects us all together except for the element of time. Or if time is a construct like so many of us believe, simply the state of being and irritation and seasons that cycle through endlessly, and the swoopings of pigeons bracketed by flashing lights. She kneels before a large oak tree covered in browning moss and lichen, and she waits idly for death perhaps, the reaching branches like thick threads that frame and reframe the deliberation of breaths, the supposed sincerity of the intention of living. And crawling up her legs, she sees two black specks. She has read that ants are drawn to suicide. And though she attempts to transform the intention of this ritual into one of apology, into a kind of impetus to regain her forward momentum and to translate all of this into a new book, her hands, like the thick and gnarled branches of the tree, only seem to reach towards the hospital ward from some distant memory. Her mother lying on a cold bed in the other room. The nurses insisting that she is too young to see her mother's body, even though she is the one who discovered the body on the street. And the nurses insist that it is better for her to hold on to the memory of her mother before. Beautiful, black hair flowing, whole and erect and standing there. The smile on her face as she turned to look back once more before running into the school building that morning. that it would be better to hold on to that memory rather than the image of her mother's corpse now, on that bitterly cold bed in the other room, discolored, disfigured, dismembered. And she is reminded of the hole in her mother's head, is reminded that the sky holds things that murder, and with the forecast of fair skies, she revels in the quality of silence and the attentiveness of the heat, and imagines, like an ancient samurai, that she might give in to the deliberate sincerity, not of living, but of disemboweling oneself. She had dreamt already many nights of the generosity of suicide, of granting a request of this magnitude. And equipped with intention, she captures the profound resolve behind tearing one's own belly open. The accompanying silence of the simulation equipped with the resolve, but not the blade that can break skin, unlike chopping up a dead fish, unlike cutting tofu, unlike dying, and then crosswise the tradition of ripping your bowels open like this, the necessity of being satisfied that one has fully torn open their bowels like this, the eternity before the final strike, before the severing that comes as a relief. In this case, it is a relief to lose one's head. And here, because your sword is also your soul, dragging open your wooden and dull soul through your bowels, the eternity of this moment, the persistence of wood against skin, of wood against flesh, and the stubborn nature of organs unwilling to tear themselves open. The waiting through poverty that becomes an unbearable intensity compared to the waiting of death. The dragging of a bamboo sword inside of your body. Even in this imagining, she has been unable to provide herself with a truly sharp object, and instead of preventing the pain she has seen as possible, has created a grosser and more unbearable kind of pain in her cowardice, in her fear of swiftness and mercy, to fully realize the dream of an honorable death. And she imagines that there are listeners in the shadows, the ghost of her own mother perhaps watching and listening to this great harmonic richness of pain and difficulty and expression. And as they watch, she swallows the lump that proceeds ever so slowly down her throat, watching, her lower lip quivers, watching, no, not yet, waiting. In this slow and protracted moment, one has all the time in the world. In this delivery of a sword, this contrary rhythm dictating a spurred ritual, the slow agony of this ritual swallows whole the glimpse, the slow waiting of life. That is the eternity of this moment, this organic configuration of shameless imitation brushing violently up against one's bowels, this slow delayed symphony of thus suspended, ancient and eternal and infinite. And it eclipses the waiting that is the rest of one's entire life, ended only by the most generous of gestures. Of course, this is only imagined, and the manipulation of her own interdependent relationship with this is just a single fiber of the system that she has woven to fulfill her basic human needs. In a dream she often has, there is a little girl wandering the street looking for her mother among the other piled bodies. How many dead mothers, she thinks, how many? The different modes and textures of language become more apparent in darkness, become more apparent as the moths that only show themselves when it is dark, yet are drawn to the light. Stupid creatures that don't seem to be able to be stopped, and yet it ought to matter that they are moths, that they are winged creatures, that they possess something that humans don't, including the incapacity for speech. She still does not know why she continues to write. Once at a book signing, a man in the audience raised his hand to ask a question, "What do you enjoy about writing?" It had been such an innocuous question, of course, but also as she stood up there awkwardly, she was always self-conscious as to her posture and so had to direct a large amount of energy into not constantly pulling up her pants and correcting her posture and cracking her neck and fidgeting with her hands, knowing that people were watching and that these visible actions would appear stranger than her appearing slightly uncomfortable without a podium to hide behind. But as writers so often are categorized as being socially awkward anyways, why not use the image as a form of conviction? And instead of aiming to be extraordinary, just aiming to fit the frame that had conveniently been created for her, frames also being beautiful and rhetorical and consoling on occasions when it is more accepted to give in to one's discomfort, rather than try to correct it in an abandonment of virtue toward, instead, characteristics like charisma and likability. She realized the impossibility of this question. that what he was really asking or assuming was that she did enjoy writing, and that she was partaking in this quaint hobby because she already enjoyed a life of being able to let the air out of her lungs whenever she desired, and that she wasn't constantly on the verge of breaking down and giving in to the creaking of the floorboards and wedging her own body down there beneath them to dull the creaking in the middle of the night, and that she didn't believe in God, but instead in the power of the word in a way that allowed agnostics to hold the kind of faith that Abraham held, and that she might have some kind of insight on how to more fully enjoy one's life and to embody the beauty of the sky as she sat down each evening to write. In all those assumptions, she felt herself getting tired. She didn't want to answer the question, but she was more afraid of the potential contempt that would come from giving an incorrect one. And so her eyes shifted around the room, resting briefly on a little girl in the bookstore, seated on a tiny chair made only for tiny people, happily and visibly enjoying the activity of flipping rapidly through a large book. And she thought back to her own childhood, and knowing that readers love sentimentality and nostalgia, answered, "It reminds me of reading with my mother, the stories she used to read to me and create for me. And so the narratives I create now are like a way of being closer to her, creating a ghost to properly haunt me." The man smiled and nodded, and she released the air that had been building up in her lungs this entire time, felt the whoosh of capability and the expectancy that had been buried in the heart of things, the details of her own journey to this point hazy and as genuinely unreadable as the manuscript she was attempting to finish now. She hears the sound of the dog's feet walking across the floor, and her knees start to shake, wobbly, as if she had been supporting the weight of someone larger than her resting on her shoulders, her head remaining rigid, and she a participant in some non-consensual initiation. She knows all too well the feeling of constant fear, the suffocation that comes with the arrow slits of sunlight that make visible the dust particles in the empty space of the room, and the enormous last deep breaths she has to take before the next last deep breath, and then another. She thrashes out her arms because sometimes she finds it easier to think with her body rather than with words. "When did you become so damn Catholic?" She remembers a colleague joking with her when she asked him what he thought of her newest manuscript. The book had been about a daughter that couldn't find herself on equal footing with the rest of the equation that included mother, father, son, so much mythology and religious significance tied to these titles. And yet the daughter, only a fictional character, attempted to investigate the root of the word inhabitation, and only discovered that it was a word saved for depravity or monsters. And as in the face of the colleague who had proceeded to laugh at her, she exhibits herself waiting and blinks as if in the face of an oncoming car in the middle of the night. One decisive factor for the increased anxiety today is that she has agreed to attend a dinner tonight. Her editor had advised her that it would be good for her image, to emerge from her cave a little more often, and that it would help her work be in better dialogue with the conditions of the world. She knows this manuscript is unreadable, and she doesn't know how to remedy that situation. And she also knows that she agreed to attend the dinner because she won't be meeting her deadline, and she wishes to maintain the image of complacency. One of her worst fears is that she might be labeled as difficult. And like the memories she also works hard to keep buried, her inability to connect intimately with anyone is also something she tries not to make visible. Like so many others, she does not know how to escape her own skin. That feeling of a necessary and precise disjunction from the body in which one is contained, inspected, exigent. She does not know how to leave for just a few moments in order to allow her body to remain in its anxiety as just flesh, without the wounds of a heart that are incapable of resolving themselves. That sense of utter despair that comes from a life of yes, please, no, I don't know, perhaps. In an effort to open up some kind of true osmosis with the world at large, she wants to feel the wind inside herself. Not just her skin, she wants to absorb her own tears back through her eyeballs and take one good deep breath as her, not her. She carves tiny pieces of flesh out from beneath her fingernails, that part of the tip of the finger where the skin is tender and hidden and accessible. And though she screams each time she pushes the blade downward, and though it is inexact and sloppy, the blade hardly small enough for precision cutting beneath a growing fingernail, for one generous hour, she's the one inflicting the pain on herself, just her fingers. And she can, in fact, feel safe from the crowded caboose cars and buses, from the exigencies of walking down the street under a clear blue sky, from the sleepless nights stumbling in and out of dreams that are as much about escaping yesterday as they are about escaping tomorrow. She lies down in the bathtub. The hot water hugs her skin fully and completely. All of her crevices feel warm and penetrated, and she can feel the water entering her body through the punctures beneath her fingernails. At the same time, she can feel the blood leaving outwards from her fingertips. And in this way, she can seep in and out with the world for a brief moment and relieve herself of the intensity that builds up inside a body that refuses to yield itself to the constant negotiation of the eternal street. And so she can color the water red and redder and muddy, and the success of this can meet the failure of life in this elegant dance of red around a body submerged in water. The body controlled by an overwhelming feeling of being suspended in the water that is hot and which slowly and ever so gradually cools with the passage of moments or with the intensifying of red and awareness of self. The bathroom light flickers. She does not notice and is already somewhere else. The desert, perhaps, is already in transit, is already and simply not here. And really, that is all she has ever hoped for. And that's it. Thank you.